Welcome, everyone. Today, we're diving into a crucial chapter of history with our presentation titled Nazism and the Rise of Hitler. On this first slide, we're setting the stage for what promises to be an insightful journey. We'll explore how Nazism emerged and how Hitler ascended to power, shaping the course of the 20th century. So, let's get started. Let's take a look at the contents of this presentation. We start with Adolf Hitler, whose story is central to understanding the rise of Nazism. Moving on, we see the concept of a genocidal war, which highlights the devastating impact of conflicts like World War I and how they set the stage for future atrocities. The war guilt clause is also crucial, as it imposed heavy penalties on Germany and fueled resentment. Next, we examine political radicalism and economic crises, which were key factors that destabilized Germany and created fertile ground for extremist ideologies. We'll explore the story of Helmuth, a personal narrative that helps illustrate these turbulent times. The birth of the Weimar Republic marked Germany's attempt at democracy after WWI, but it faced many challenges. We then look at the years of depression, a period that worsened economic hardships and increased political unrest. The effects of the war, both physical and psychological, played a significant role in shaping Germany's future. Hitler's rise to power is an essential focus, showing how he capitalized on these crises to gain support. The symbolism of the swastika and the Nazi salute became powerful tools for unifying and mobilizing supporters. Propaganda was also a vital element, used effectively to spread Nazi ideology and manipulate public opinion. Throughout this presentation, we see how these interconnected factors, political upheaval, economic distress, propaganda, and symbolism, converge to lead Germany down a dark and tragic path. Understanding these key points helps us grasp the broader theme of how extremism can emerge from chaos and despair. Today, I want to focus on Adolf Hitler, a central figure in this period of history. He was the leader of Nazi Germany and played a pivotal role in shaping the events that led to World War II. Hitler's rise to power was marked by his ability to exploit economic hardship and nationalistic feelings in Germany after World War I. His ideology promoted extreme nationalism, anti-Semitism, and the belief in racial superiority. These ideas fueled policies that led to immense suffering and the Holocaust. Understanding Hitler's life and actions is crucial because it helps us grasp how dangerous charismatic leadership combined with destructive ideologies can become. This slide sets the stage for exploring how his leadership impacted the course of history and the world at large. In the spring of 1945, I want you to imagine a young boy, just 11 years old, lying in his bed. He overhears his parents talking in very serious tones. His father mentions a deep fear of revenge, saying, "Now the Allies will do to us what we did to the crippled and Jews." It's a powerful moment of realization about the weight of guilt and fear. Later that same day, his father takes a drastic step. He shoots himself in his office. This event leaves a profound and lasting impact on the boy. In fact, he becomes so traumatized by what he overheard and what followed that he refuses to eat at home for the next 9 years, fearing his mother might poison him. This story highlights how trauma and fear, especially in a time of chaos and war, can deeply affect a person's life. It connects to our broader theme of how individual experiences shape our understanding of morality, guilt, and resilience during difficult times. Let's talk about Nazism and its impact on Helmuth's family. Helmuth's father had been a Nazi and a supporter of Adolf Hitler. This connection to the Nazi regime is important because it helps us understand the environment Helmuth was growing up in. Now, let's explore why Helmuth's father chose to take his own life. The key reason was the collapse of Nazi Germany at the end of the war. In May 1945, Germany officially surrendered to the Allies, marking a devastating defeat for the Nazis. Leading up to that, Hitler, along with his propaganda minister Goebbels and their families, made the tragic decision to commit collective suicide in April, right in Hitler's Berlin bunker. This was an act of despair and a desire to avoid capture. After the war, the Allies established the Nuremberg trials, a significant moment in history. These international tribunals aimed to bring Nazi war criminals to justice for crimes like crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. These crimes were mainly related to the brutal conduct of Germany during the war, especially actions that targeted civilians and violated human rights on a massive scale. Connecting all of this to our overall theme, it's clear how deeply the Nazi ideology and the war's atrocities shaped personal stories like Helmuth's. It shows us the tragic consequences of hatred and extremism, not just for nations, but for individuals and families as well. Let's take a closer look at the alliances during the World Wars. In the Second World War, the Allies were initially led by the United Kingdom and France. These were the main countries fighting against the Axis powers early on. Then, in 1941, two major players joined the Allies, the Soviet Union and the United States. Their entry significantly shifted the balance and strengthened the Allied side. On the other hand, the Axis powers consisted of Germany, Italy, and Japan. These countries collaborated to pursue expansion and dominance during the war. Now, if we look back at the First World War, the alliances were a bit different. The main allies included Great Britain, France, Russia, Italy, Romania, Japan, and the United States. They fought against the Central Powers, which were Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire. Connecting these points to the overall theme, understanding these alliances helps us see how interconnected countries were and how their relationships shaped the course of history. The shifting alliances and the balance of power played crucial roles in how these conflicts unfolded. When we talk about genocidal war, we're referring to large-scale killings that lead to the destruction of entire groups of people. It's a horrifying form of violence aimed at wiping out communities based on their identity. During the shadow of the Second World War, Nazi Germany orchestrated such atrocities on an unprecedented scale. They murdered around 6 million Jews, which is one of the most well-known aspects of the Holocaust. But the victims weren't only Jews. They also targeted approximately 200,000 Gypsies, or Roma people, and about 1 million Polish civilians. Additionally, the Nazis murdered around 70,000 Germans who were considered mentally or physically disabled, and many political opponents who dared to oppose their regime. One of the most shocking methods they devised was gassing people in extermination centers like Auschwitz. This method of mass killing was both systematic and industrialized, reflecting a terrifying level of organization and cruelty. After the war, the Nuremberg Tribunal held trials to bring some of these perpetrators to justice. They sentenced only 11 leading Nazis to death, while many others received life imprisonment. This process was crucial in establishing accountability for such heinous crimes. Overall, this slide highlights the brutal reality of genocidal war and reminds us of the importance of remembering these atrocities to prevent them from happening again. So, to understand the birth of the Weimar Republic, we need to look at Germany's role in World War I. Germany fought alongside Austria-Hungary against the Allies, which included countries like England, France, and Russia. In the early stages of the war, Germany actually made some significant gains, such as occupying parts of France and Belgium. But as the war dragged on, the tide turned. The Allies, especially after the United States entered the war in 1917, gained strength. By November 1918, Germany was defeated, and the Central Powers, which included Germany, had to surrender. Following this defeat, the German emperor abdicated, which marked a huge political shift. A new National Assembly gathered in Weimar to create a new government. They established a democratic constitution that was federal in structure, giving more power to individual states. One of the key points was how deputies were elected to the German parliament, or Reichstag. This was based on universal suffrage, meaning all adults, including women, could vote. This was a major step toward democracy in Germany. Overall, this slide shows how the end of World War I led directly to the formation of the Weimar Republic, transforming Germany's political landscape from an imperial autocracy to a democratic state. Let's take a look at the countries involved in the First World War. This conflict wasn't limited to just a few nations. It truly was a global war, with many countries taking sides. On one side, we had the Allies, which primarily included countries like Britain, France, Russia, and later the United States. On the other side, the Central Powers were mainly made up of Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria. It's important to understand that these alliances played a huge role in escalating the conflict, turning what could have been a regional dispute into a massive-scale war. The involvement of so many nations also meant that the war affected different parts of the world, shaping the course of history in numerous regions. By highlighting the key players, we can better grasp how interconnected political alliances and national interests contributed to the scope and scale of the war. This sets the stage for understanding the profound impacts and consequences that followed. The Weimar Republic faced a lot of criticism from its own people, and a big reason for that was the harsh terms it had to accept after Germany's defeat in World War I. The peace treaty at Versailles was incredibly tough and, frankly, quite humiliating for Germany. They lost their overseas colonies, which was a huge blow to their empire. Additionally, Germany had to give up a tenth of its population and about 13% of its territory. This included losing 75% of its iron resources and 26% of its coal. These resources were vital for the economy, and they were handed over to countries like France, Poland, Denmark, and Lithuania. Another key point is that the Allied powers aimed to weaken Germany militarily. They demilitarized the country, which meant reducing its armed forces significantly. All of these harsh terms fueled resentment and instability, and they are crucial to understanding the challenges the Weimar Republic faced in trying to rebuild Germany after the war. These treaty conditions also connect to the broader themes of how peace agreements can sow the seeds of future conflict. Now let's look at the War Guilt Clause. This was a key part of the Treaty of Versailles, and it essentially held Germany responsible for starting the war and for the damages suffered by the Allied countries. It was a very heavy blow to German pride. As a result, Germany was forced to pay massive compensation, about £6 billion, which was an enormous burden for the country to bear. Additionally, the Allies occupied the resource-rich Rhineland for much of the 1920s. This occupation was meant to ensure compliance, but also added to the resentment in Germany. Many Germans saw the Weimar Republic, which was the new government, as weak and responsible for accepting these harsh terms. They blamed the government not only for losing the war, but also for the humiliating terms of the treaty at Versailles. All of these points, responsibility, reparations, occupation, fueled a sense of injustice and contributed to the political and economic instability that followed. This slide highlights how the treaty, while meant to secure peace, also sowed the seeds of resentment and future conflict. The effects of the war were truly devastating across the entire continent. It wasn't just the physical destruction, but also the psychological and financial toll that really shaped what came next. Before the war, Europe was seen as a continent of creditors. People lent money, invested, and built wealth. But after the war, everything changed. Europe shifted from being a creditor to a debtor, struggling to pay off the enormous debts incurred during the conflict. This shift had profound implications, especially for the new Weimar Republic in Germany. Unfortunately, they were left to pay for the sins of the old empire, those debts and damages that were not entirely their fault. It's important to understand that the Weimar Republic was a fragile new government, trying to establish itself in a time of chaos and hardship. And sadly, they faced a lot of hostility from conservative nationalist circles. The people who supported the Weimar Republic, mainly socialists, Catholics, and Democrats, became easy targets for criticism and attack. They were often called the November criminals, a term that was used to delegitimize them and blame them for Germany's defeat and the harsh peace terms. So, in understanding these effects, we see how the war's aftermath created deep divisions and set the stage for many of the conflicts that followed. The war's impact wasn't just about the destruction, but also about how it reshaped national identities and political sentiments across the continent. Let's take a closer look at Germany. As one of the key players in Europe, Germany has a significant impact on both the economy and technological innovation. Its strong manufacturing sector, especially in automotive and engineering industries, drives much of its economic strength. Germany is also known for its high-quality education and research institutions, which foster innovation. In the context of our overall theme, Germany exemplifies how a country can leverage its industrial base and scholarly resources to maintain a competitive edge on the global stage. This balance between tradition and innovation continues to shape its future trajectory. On this slide, we see how the war impacted society and perceptions. Soldiers were often elevated above civilians, symbolizing the heroic ideal that was promoted at the time. Politicians and publicists emphasized the importance of masculinity, stress on strength, aggression, and toughness, to rally support and boost morale. The media, in particular, tended to glorify trench life, portraying it as noble and glamorous, but the reality was quite different. Soldiers endured miserable conditions, trapped in trenches filled with rats feeding on corpses, exposed to deadly gas, and under constant enemy shelling. Their ranks quickly thinned as many fell in combat. This contrast highlights how propaganda shaped perceptions, even when the truth was far from romantic. Lastly, it's important to remember that democracy, which was still relatively young, proved fragile in the volatile environment of interwar Europe. The chaos and instability tested its resilience, showing how difficult it was to sustain democratic ideals during such turbulent times. So, as the Weimar Republic was just beginning, it coincided with a significant revolutionary wave. The Spartacist League, inspired by the Bolshevik Revolution, led uprisings in many cities, trying to push for radical change. However, not everyone was on board with that approach. Socialists, Democrats, and Catholics gathered in Weimar to shape a more moderate, democratic government, aiming to stabilize the country after the chaos. The uprising was eventually suppressed with the help of a paramilitary group called the Free Corps, which was mainly composed of war veterans. This suppression marked a turning point, as the Spartacists, feeling betrayed and defeated, went on to establish the Communist Party of Germany. From that point on, communists and socialists became bitter enemies, unable to unite even against common threats like Hitler later on. This division within the left was a crucial factor in Germany's turbulent path during this period, connecting to the broader theme of political radicalism and economic crises that destabilized the Weimar Republic. Germany had fought the war largely on loans and was required to pay war reparations in gold. This significantly depleted their gold reserves, especially at a time when resources were already scarce. In 1923, Germany decided not to pay these reparations, which led to the French occupying their main industrial area, the Ruhr, to claim their coal and other resources. As a response, Germany adopted a policy of passive resistance, which meant they refused to cooperate with the French occupation. Simultaneously, they started printing paper currency recklessly. This overprinting caused an excess of money in circulation, which drastically reduced the value of the German mark. This episode is a clear example of how political radicalism and economic crises are interconnected, often fueling each other during times of national instability. It also highlights the broader theme of how economic hardship can lead to radical political movements and unrest. In April, the exchange rate was about 24,000 marks to $1, but by July, it had skyrocketed to 353,000 marks. Then in August, it jumped again to over 4.6 million marks, and by December, it had reached an astonishing 98.86 million marks. And as you can imagine, by that point, the figures were in the trillions. This rapid devaluation of the mark led to a situation where prices for goods skyrocketed, what we call hyperinflation. It's a situation where prices shoot up at such an incredible rate that money loses its value almost overnight. This crisis created chaos in the German economy and made everyday life extremely difficult. Eventually, the United States stepped in to help Germany stabilize. They introduced the Dawes Plan, which was essentially a reworking of the reparation payments. This plan aimed to ease the financial burden on Germany by restructuring the repayment terms, giving them some breathing room to recover. This intervention was crucial in stabilizing the economy and is a key moment connecting the economic turmoil to the broader political radicalism, we're discussing, showing how economic crises can fuel unrest and radical ideas. So, during the years of depression, we see that German investments and industrial recovery were heavily reliant on short-term loans, mainly from the United States. These loans were crucial for supporting economic growth and rebuilding after World War I. However, this support suddenly came to a halt when the Wall Street crash happened in 1929. On that disastrous day, October 24th, what we now call Black Thursday, about 13 million shares were sold in a single day. That was the beginning of what we call the Great Depression, a worldwide economic downturn. Over the next 3 years, from 1929 to 1932, the U.S. economy shrank dramatically. National income dropped by about 50%. Factories closed their doors, exports plummeted, farmers suffered greatly, and investors started pulling their money out of the markets in panic. And the really important point here is how interconnected the global economy had become. The recession in the U.S. didn't stay confined. It rippled across the world, affecting economies everywhere. This period marked a significant turning point that would influence economic policies and global relations for years to come. The years of depression hit Germany particularly hard during this period. By 1932, industrial production had plummeted to just 40% of its pre-crisis level, which had a devastating impact on the economy. Workers faced immense hardships. Many lost their jobs entirely, while others were forced to accept reduced wages. The unemployment rate soared to an unprecedented 6 million people, creating a situation of widespread despair. If you walked through the streets of Germany at that time, you would see men wearing placards around their necks saying, "Willing to do any work," desperately seeking employment. Unemployed youths often spent their days playing cards, sitting on street corners, or lining up at employment exchanges, hopping for a chance to work. As jobs disappeared, many young people lost hope and turned to criminal activities, which became more common as a way to survive. Overall, this period of economic crisis fueled a sense of hopelessness and social unrest that set the stage for profound changes in Germany's society and politics. During the years of depression, we see how small businessmen, the self-employed, and retailers all suffered greatly as their businesses were ruined. These groups faced a lot of fear, mainly the fear of proletarianization, that is, the worry of being pushed down into the working class or even worse, becoming unemployed. It was a time of great insecurity for many. Only organized workers, those part of unions or collective movements, managed to keep their heads above water, which highlights the importance of collective action during tough times. Meanwhile, big business was also struggling and in crisis, showing that the depression affected the entire economic spectrum. We also can't forget the large peasantry, who were hit hard by falling agricultural prices. For many women, this meant a deep sense of despair, especially when they couldn't even fill their children's stomachs. All these points connect to the broader theme of how economic downturns deeply impacted different social groups, creating widespread hardship and anxiety across society. Let's take a closer look at some of the inherent issues within the Weimar Republic's constitution that contributed to its instability. One major flaw was proportional representation. While this system aimed to fairly reflect diverse political views, it also meant that forming a stable majority was extremely difficult. This often resulted in coalitions, alliances between multiple parties, that could be fragile and short-lived. Another critical point was Article 48. This provision granted the president significant powers, including the ability to impose emergency measures, suspend civil rights, and rule by decree. While intended as a safeguard in practice, it was used quite liberally. During the Weimar Republic's short life, there were around 20 different cabinets, each lasting roughly 239 days on average. This frequent change, combined with the extensive use of Article 48, made the government less stable and more vulnerable to authoritarian tendencies. These weaknesses in the Constitution ultimately undermined the democratic foundation of the Weimar Republic and opened the door for more radical forces to seize power. Understanding these flaws helps us see why the Republic struggled so much from the very beginning. let's take a closer look at Hitler's rise to power, which was deeply shaped by the turbulent times he lived through. The economic, political, and social crises that Germany faced created a fertile ground for radical ideas to flourish. Born in 1889 in Austria, Hitler grew up in poverty, which influenced his worldview from a young age. When World War I broke out, he enlisted in the army and served as a messenger on the front lines. He was recognized for his bravery and became a corporal, earning medals for his valor. The defeat of Germany in the war was a shocking blow to him, and the harsh terms of the Versailles Treaty only fueled his anger and resentment. In 1919, he joined a small political group called the German Workers' Party. He was a charismatic speaker and quickly took control of the organization, transforming it into the Nazi Party, or the National Socialist German Workers' Party. This party would later become central to Hitler's rise and the dark chapter of history that followed. So, you see, these early experiences and the post-war chaos set the stage for Hitler's ascent, illustrating how crisis can sometimes give rise to dangerous leaders. In 1923, Hitler made a bold attempt to take control of Bavaria, planning to march to Berlin and seize power. However, this effort failed, and he was arrested, tried for treason, and subsequently released. This early failure didn't stop him, but it was a significant moment in his rise. It was really during the Great Depression that Nazism started to grow into a mass movement. As many of you know, after 1929, banks collapsed, businesses shut down, and millions of workers lost their jobs. The middle classes, who once felt secure, were now facing the threat of losing everything. In this bleak environment, Nazi propaganda played a crucial role. It stirred hopes among ordinary people for a better future, offering solutions and a sense of purpose. Looking at the political landscape, in 1928, the Nazi Party only gained about 2.6% of the votes in the Reichstag, which was a very small share. But by 1932, that support skyrocketed, and they became the largest party with 37% of the vote. This rapid rise reflects how economic hardship and effective propaganda can dramatically change political fortunes, and it sets the stage for the further developments in Germany's history. Now, let's talk about propaganda. Propaganda is a specific type of message that's designed to influence people's opinions. It's not just random information. It's targeted to shape how people think. You might have seen it through posters, films, speeches, or even other media. The goal is to sway public perception and often to promote a particular idea or agenda. This makes propaganda a powerful tool in shaping public attitudes, especially during times of conflict or social change. Throughout our discussion, you'll see how propaganda has been used historically to influence masses, and how it connects to broader themes of communication and persuasion. Now, let's talk about Nazi propaganda and Hitler's role in shaping it. Hitler was an incredibly powerful speaker. His passion and his words had a real ability to move people and stir their emotions. When he spoke, he was able to inspire loyalty and hope among many Germans who were desperate for change. He made some very bold promises. He vowed to build a strong, united nation, something many Germans longed for after the chaos of World War I. He promised to undo the injustice of the Versailles Treaty, which many Germans saw as humiliating and unfair. His goal was to restore the dignity of the German people, making them proud again. Hitler also promised economic improvements. He assured those looking for work that they would find jobs, and he promised a secure future for the youth, an important point because many young people felt uncertain about their future during that unstable time. Additionally, he emphasized a desire to eliminate foreign influences, which he labeled as harmful or conspiratorial. He insisted that Germany needed to resist foreign conspiracies and influence to protect its sovereignty and purity. All these promises and ideas were central to his propaganda efforts, helping him gain support and rally the nation around his vision. They also tied into the larger theme of how propaganda was used to manipulate public opinion and build a powerful, unified movement. Let's talk about Nazi propaganda and how Hitler crafted a new style of politics. He really understood the power of rituals and spectacle in rallying the masses. The Nazis organized huge rallies and public meetings, not just to show support for Hitler, but also to create a strong sense of unity among the people. You can see how the red banners with the swastika, the Nazi salute, and the enthusiastic applause after speeches all contributed to this grand display of power. These spectacles weren't just about presentation, they were about inspiring loyalty and collective identity. All of these elements fit into the larger picture of how propaganda was used to shape public perception and solidify Hitler's influence. It's a clear example of how spectacle and ritual can be powerful tools in politics. Let's take a moment to discuss the swastika. This symbol has a complex history, extending far beyond its association with the 20th century connotations. Originally, it's an ancient symbol found in many cultures worldwide, representing good luck, prosperity, and well-being. Its design, comprising a cross with arms bent at right angles, appears in art, architecture, and religious contexts across Asia, Europe, and Africa. However, in the 20th century, the swastika was appropriated by the Nazi Party in Germany, which drastically changed its perception in the modern world. This association with hate, violence, and genocide has overshadowed its original meanings for many. Understanding this dual history highlights how symbols can be powerful and complex, carrying different meanings depending on cultural and historical contexts. It also reminds us why sensitivity and awareness are crucial when discussing symbols with such layered pasts. Overall, the swastika exemplifies how symbols can evolve and be reinterpreted over time, connecting to our broader theme of cultural symbolism and the importance of understanding history's influence on present perceptions. Let's take a moment to discuss the Nazi salute, a symbol that became deeply associated with the regime's ideology and power. This gesture, often called the Hitler salute, involved extending the right arm straight out with the palm facing downward. It was used as a greeting to show allegiance and loyalty to Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. The salute wasn't just a greeting. It was a powerful propaganda tool meant to unify people under Nazi ideals and demonstrate obedience. It played a significant role in reinforcing the regime's control and fostering a sense of collective identity among supporters. Understanding this gesture helps us grasp how symbols and rituals can be used to manipulate social and political dynamics. It's a stark reminder of how gestures can carry complex meanings and serve as tools of propaganda. Throughout this presentation, we've seen how the Nazi regime systematically used symbols like this to solidify their power and influence. The salute wasn't just a physical act. It embodied the values and the totalitarian control the Nazis sought to establish. Now, let's turn our attention to Nazi propaganda and how it was skillfully used as a powerful tool. The Nazi regime understood the importance of controlling information and shaping public perception. They employed sophisticated propaganda techniques to spread their ideology and manipulate public opinion. This included posters, speeches, films, and even education, all designed to foster nationalism and anti-Semitic sentiments. What's particularly important to understand is how propaganda was not just about spreading messages, but about creating a narrative that aligned with their goals. It was a highly strategic effort to unify the German people behind their vision and justify their actions. Recognizing these tactics helps us see how propaganda can influence societies and underscores the importance of media literacy today. This is a crucial part of understanding the overall theme of manipulation and power during that era.